Dear audience, do subscribe to this channel and click on the notification bell so that you will be first notified whenever I have uploaded a new video. In the past, I have talked about the outline of health. This is to help you see the full picture of your health. Think about our body as a car. A car runs on fuels. For examples, the diesel or the gas. The difference is one releases high environmental pollution and the other one is less. Second, I have talked about digestive system. My message was, you are not what you eat. Indeed, you are what you could digest and absorb. My third video was about the pH of the human body. I talk about how pH regulates our body condition with different acidic levels because different parts of our body have different pH condition. We must understand it correctly. My fourth and fifth videos talk about the glucose. The glucose in human body, part 1 and part 2. I talk about what is it like when glucose is the fuel we use in our bodies. In my last video, which was my sixth video, I talk about the carbs and sugars confusion because most people misunderstand the carbs and sugars in human body. Today, I want to talk about the overall fuel condition in human body. The first question is, what are the fuels in our bodies? What is the logic? Here is the full picture in a nutshell. Look at this diagram. The food we eat turn into three types of fuels: glucose, fat, and protein. Protein is the indirect fuel. We will talk about the logic of protein later. Let's focus on the glucose and the fat first. Let's follow this diagram. When food breaks down and becomes glucose, glucose will trigger insulin. The function of insulin is to move the glucose from the bloodstream and store it inside the cells of liver and muscles. The glucose will be stored as glycogen, but glycogen has a limit below 2,000 calories. Once this limit is filled, glycogen will be converted into fat. This is the path of glucose. The path of fat is different. When the food is fat, fat is the fuel directly. Fat does not have to convert. It is the ready fuel. Therefore, it will stay in the bloodstream or in the liver. When fat breaks down, it will break down into glycerol and fatty acids. In the situation when the gluconeogenesis needs to take place, the glycerol will be converted into glucose for the body to use as fuel. Otherwise, the fat will be burned into ketones. We will talk about the protein separately. The next question is, what is the problem here? The problem is insulin. First, insulin is an anabolic hormone. Anabolic means building. Insulin is a building hormone. It takes the glucose from the bloodstream and store it in the cell and keep building. Insulin builds glycogen and fat. This is why our body will be ballooning. Second, it's time to talk about protein. Part of the protein could become glucose. When it becomes glucose, it can also be stored as glycogen when there is insulin. How? What is the logic? Let's watch this video.
Protein also gets turned into tissues. We use it to build tissues and muscles. Now we need to understand a little bit about protein. So you eat food, it has protein, but your body has to break down the protein into amino acids. So if you look at this picture, these individual little components, these are molecules called amino acids. And then we string these together by the dozens, by the hundreds, by the thousands, and then they form proteins. And because of how these proteins have different charges, then these proteins fold themselves and create different shapes, and that is what's unique about protein. So we have to break these individual pieces down because these can only pass across the intestinal membrane. They can only be absorbed one by one. If we don't break them down, we can't absorb them. And then once we've absorbed them, we are putting them back into other proteins that have specific purposes in the body. Even though there are hundreds or even thousands of amino acids, there are 20 that are used in the human body to configure these proteins. And out of these 20, there are 8 or 9, depending on who you talk to, that are essential, meaning that we have to add them in the diet. We have to eat them because the body can't make them. But if we eat these 8 or 9, then we can make the other for a total of 20. And the reason they don't know quite sure if it's 8 or 9 is that it seems histidine, which is the 9th one, can be made from the other 8. But today we'll just assume that there's 9 of them. We often hear about animal protein versus plant protein in terms of the protein being complete or not. And we also want to talk about how much, what percentage of the protein is being utilized. Does it turn into tissue, meaning it's utilized, or does it turn into glucose and fuel and drive insulin? And now we want to think of these 9 essential amino acids as building blocks or letters. So if you're going to spell out a 9-letter words, you need 9 different letters in this case, 9 essential amino acids. So this is a protein called prolamine. It has 9 letters, 9 different ones. But let's say that you're missing 1 letter. You have 8 letters, you don't have the 9th one. And now you go to spell a 9-letter word. You're going to build a protein with 9 essential amino acids. How many of those words, how many of those amino acids can you build? And the answer is 0. You cannot spell this word unless you have that letter. And what this means then is all of the other amino acids gets turned into glucose. And that means this protein is not complete. And that's why it's so important to eat a variety of foods, especially if you are a vegan or vegetarian.
Now, let's talk about fat. When will fat get burned? What determines fat burning? Let's watch this video first.
What is the hormone that determines whether you burn fat or burn sugar? Do you know? There is a hormone that will determine this. And I'm going to use a reference called Guyton's Medical Physiology, the Bible of medical physiology, used in all the medical schools and also pre-med classes. So on page 926, here it says, actually 927, it says all aspects of fat metabolism are greatly enhanced in the absence of insulin. So all fat burning is greatly enhanced when you don't have insulin. Okay, now over here, the role of insulin in switching between carbohydrate and lipid metabolism, or that's fat metabolism. It says right here, when the glucose concentration is low, when sugar is low, insulin secretion is suppressed and fat is utilized almost exclusively for energy, right? And there's many, many references in here that talk about when you have insulin lack, when you're lacking insulin, your body is forced to burn fat. So insulin is the main hormone that we need to keep suppressed if we have any chance or hope of getting into fat burning, okay? So when insulin is high, you're going to stimulate sugar. When insulin is low, you're going to stimulate fat burning, all right?
Do you see that? It is clear that insulin is the problem. Insulin stores glucose and fat, and the body always burns glucose first. Therefore, if we cut off carbs and sugars, this is what will happen. Look at this diagram. In the absence of carbs and sugars, our bodies will burn fat. The energy we get from burning fat is ketones. When our bodies need glucose, the glycerol will be converted into glucose, and the amino acid will also be converted into glucose. You see, we don't have to eat carbs and sugars in order to have glucose. Dear audience, the good news is if you have decided letting go carbs and sugars as your source of energy, you only take 1 to 2 days. Why? Remember, you only store less than 2,000 calories of glycogen. The normal calorie consumption for a person per day is 2,000 calories. Therefore, it only takes 1 or 2 days to deplete the glucose in your bodies. Then your bodies will begin burning fat. Dear audience, do you see that? Do you see what happens when you take carbs and sugars? Let's refresh. Number one, carbs and sugars make your bodies ballooning. Why? Because carbs and sugars trigger insulin. And insulin is the anabolic hormones, the building hormones. Insulin will keep taking the glucose out from your bloodstream and store it in your cells. Because of this, insulin also causes your sugar level fluctuates. When insulin keeps taking the sugar out, your sugar level will be too low. Then you will trigger glucagon to add sugar into your bloodstream. That could also be too much. Can you see the fluctuation? Low and high, low and high. As a result, your bodies will become insulin resistant. This is the vicious cycle to all your health issues. However, if you take the fat as your fuel, you will not trigger insulin at all. Watch this video.
Fat doesn't have any insulin response to speak of. It's virtually zero because fat doesn't get turned into storage or into tissue. It is already the form that the body needs it, which is fuel. So when we eat carbs, we want to turn it into fat for future use, but the fat itself is already fuel, so it doesn't have an insulin response to it.
For your information, the science has proven that our brain and our hearts prefer ketones. The point is, fat will not be built up like glucose because fat will not trigger insulin. And fat gives the sense of satiation. With fat, when you take fat, you feel full very easily and it lasts for a long time. Therefore, you will not feel hungry quickly nor craving easily. The benefit is when you are too busy, you don't have to eat. You can continue and eat when you have time to eat. It's all about the fuel in human body. In my next video, I will talk about how to let go carbs and sugars and how to switch over to ketogenic diets. See you in my next video. Dear audience, if you enjoy this video, do subscribe to this channel and click on the notification bell so that you will be first notified whenever I have uploaded a new video. I am a certified professional coach and an HRDF certified trainer. I am promoting reflection process with logical thinking to gain clarity. Thank you for watching this video. See you in my next video.